At this point, we start adding things. So this is going to be my basic chocolate chip and walnut cookie. So I'm going to dump in some chocolate chips. I'll be right back. So usually you'll want about half a cup of chocolate chips for basic um, for a basic batch of cookies. I will do this by eye because it's fun to just pour them in until it looks like just a little more than enough. Again, suit this to taste. If you want your cookies packed with chocolate chips, throw in some more. If you want them fairly sparse, you can do a little bit less. You mix them in the lazy way, electrically, mechanically. And last thing, I'm going to add in some chopped walnuts. Obviously, don't do this if you're serving them to anyone with nut allergies. The walnuts add a nice crunchy texture and a little bit of saltiness that works with and against the chocolate as well. Okay, so I'm heating the oven to 350 Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius if you're using a Celsius oven for some reason. And I've covered a baking tray with some parchment paper, which will make life much, much easier when it comes to cleaning up. And you can use the same sheet of parchment paper over and over and over again for several trays worth of cookies. So if you want to save yourself a little bit of work and you can recycle the paper later, it's a nice little trick. So for this first tray, I've started with quite small cookies. That's a teaspoon there for reference. So it's about a teaspoonful of dough in each one. I mostly just pick them up in my hands and make them as small as I think they can be while still being cookies. So these should each come out to a nice kind of snack-sized bite. The kind of cookie size that you can eat without feeling guilty about, but you may end up eating by the dozen. And you can see the dough is still pretty sticky. It's not forming neat balls, and that's a matter of preference for me. If we added more flour, it would be a smoother dough, and you'd get a thicker, cakier cookie. I'm looking for thin and chewy, so there's a bit more butter and a little bit less flour in the basic recipe, and I won't be leaving them in the oven for very long. We'll get to that step next. Okay. And I've prepped a second batch here, and they're going to go in the oven along with that first batch. These are considerably larger. These are aiming to be kind of heftier, several bite cookies, a little bit more serious. And like the other ones, I've made them as spheres rather than pressing them down because I want them to melt and spread, and that should help them get a little bit of thickness while still being fairly chewy. Now just waiting for the oven to heat up and we can get these in and get them baking. The oven is heated up and I've got my two trays in. The smaller cookies are on top, so they'll cook faster, and the larger ones are starting on the bottom, and then we'll move up to the top once the smaller ones are done. And I tend to be a little bit industrial about my cookie making, so as the first two trays are in, I've got a third tray prepped and ready to go, and I will have those in rotation until we're done. And I've got two cooling racks prepared to receive the cookies as soon as they come out of the oven. You'll want to check on the cookies between 5 and 10 minutes after you put them in, depending a little bit on the size and how you like them. I want these soft, so my first batch of small cookies are coming out. Second tray rather, of big cookies are moving up. And third tray of slightly smallish medium cookies are going in on the bottom. Because I want these soft, I pull them out when they're looking just a tiny bit underdone. They are fully cooked, they're totally safe to eat. They are at this point warm and delicious, and the melting chocolate will probably burn your mouth, but it's very tempting. I'm not licking dough off my hands in between takes, and I'm scandalized that you would even think such a thing. So I've transferred my first tray of cookies onto the cooling rack, just right on their parchment paper, and now I'm going to move them one at a time, very carefully by hand, onto the second rack so that they can cool down. They're still very soft, but I've given them about a minute or two to sit once I pulled them out of the oven so that they're not falling apart as I move them. If you were going to taste one, this would be the optimal time. All right, that one wasn't quite ready, and it's sort of melting onto the rack, or collapsing a little bit. Now I'm going to take this parchment paper that I've used once, put it right back onto the tray, and I'm going to use that for my final round of cookies. So I've now pulled out the second tray of cookies. They're, again, looking a tiny bit underdone because these are larger. I want to balance out and make sure they are cooked all the way through, so I wait till the edges are looking fully cooked and just starting to get a little bit browned, and that's when I will take them out. If you like your cookies crispy, leave them in a little bit longer. If you like your cookies burnt, leave them in even longer than that. And now I'm just waiting for these to cool before moving them onto the rack. I'm now testing one of my cookies. This is, oh, it's really good. The chocolate is melted, the nuts are crunchy, everything's very soft and chewy, and these are the little tiny ones that you can finish off in one bite or 2 bites if you're being patient. Just for comparison, this is how my 4 batches turned out. First one's fairly tiny, second one's larger and a little bit more baked, a little bit more crispy. It wasn't entirely intentional, but I'll take it, add some variety. Third ones are kind of medium, and for some reason for the last batch, which was just using up the remains of the batter, by that point there were not a lot of chocolate chips left in there, so we got much flatter, sort of plainer looking cookies, also still very soft and very chewy. And now I'm going to get these into a plastic container while they're still a tiny bit warm, and that will keep them soft and chewy until I serve them tomorrow, or possibly eat more of them later tonight.